Welcome to the Zachrilege Cast podcast YouTube video interview program that features me talking to some of the best and brightest in the atheist secular awesome community. This is episode number 197. I recorded this interview on July 22nd, 2019. Thank you to Deborah and Jeannie for hanging out with me, and we are already planning the follow-up. Deborah gets homework, aka lawyers behaving badly. That's a topic that may need some follow-ups. Tonight's guest is a former member of the military, a police officer, a father, a husband, a Miami Dolphins fan, pukes inwardly, Reggie Bonami, or Reggie Beloved on Facebook, the creator of Haitian Freethinkers, the community, and the podcast. We talked about his boots being on the ground during the invasion of Iraq, going into officer school so that he could get deployed again into Afghanistan, starting the Haitian Freethinkers, public speaking, and what it was like hanging out with the atheist community of Austin before the once heralded institution became perhaps the last atheist space to turn into a complete dumpster fire. Let's continue the conversation.
I'm never going to church again.
Homer, are you actually giving up your faith?
No. Well, yeah.
Welcome to the Zachrilege Cast! Reggie, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing wonderful. How are you?
Oh, doing great. Earlier in the week, just glad to... I've had this thing where this show's been all about getting podcasters on, and then I feel like I've only talked to like 2 podcasters in the past 3 months, or people that I haven't had on for the first time. So I'm glad we finally got to get together because we met in person, I believe, 2 years ago at NanoCon at a podcast panel, and we just haven't reached out before. So let's see. So we're going to begin with kind of the personal, and then we'll get to Haitian Freethinkers. So where were you born?
I was born in Port-au-Prince, Haiti in December of 1979. So born in Haiti, came over to the United States in December of 88. So I had just turned 9. And was basically raised in Miami, Florida, but I currently live in Atlanta, Georgia.
That's right. We got another local, so that's good.
Yeah.
So what was your family or personal kind of religious background growing up?
My family was Catholic, at least from my early understanding of what religion was. We did... I did my, I don't know what the term is. We did my communion. We did my party when I was young in Haiti. So basically that involved just reciting some words to a priest, which I remember very clearly as a young person. So we were Catholic, like a lot of Haitians are. And then when I came over to the United States, my mother started to go to Protestant churches. And I did notice the difference a little bit, but it wasn't until I went back to a Catholic church later on that I saw how different Protestantism was different from Catholicism. But at the time, being a child, I just thought that everybody was pretty much Christian. So it was like no big deal. And then eventually at the age of 16, I kind of gave my life to Jesus on my own after kind of being pressured by a local pastor. So I became a Baptist around 16.
And how did that go?
Well, it's a funny story. So the pastor, I used to go to churches with friends because I was very into socializing. My mother didn't mind if I didn't go to her church as long as I went to a church and I hung out with friends. So this pastor, his name is Pastor George. He's from the islands. He was very cool, very nice. He picked us up. So he was kind of like a father figure. And one day he kind of put the pressure on me, hey, listen, you're a nice guy, you're smart, but you're going to go to hell if you don't choose Jesus personally, He gave me some Jack Chick tracks, and I remember going to my room.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I read this one particular tract, and I basically said, what the hell? Let me give it a go. And so I prayed the Lord's Prayer. I remember closing my eyes and I thought, is something magical supposed to happen? Nothing really did happen, but I did take my conversion as serious as one could as a teenager. Um, you know, and I eventually joined the military, mostly to pay for college, like a lot of people do. And the adventure just continued. But so I would say I started off as a Catholic by association. Then I personally chose Jesus as a Baptist, and then just continued.
So you've been baptized multiple times?
I got baptized once on my own free will as an adult in 2006. And this was ironically after I came back from Iraq, after I started reading the Bible. I don't remember if I completed reading the Bible at the time, but I was aware of a lot of the issues in the Bible, but I still chose to go through this baptism course, hoping as a last ditch effort to kind of salvage religion for myself. And again, I took it very seriously, but the skepticism was too much to overcome. And in August of 2009, which is next month, my 10-year anniversary is coming up being an atheist. It didn't work out. So,
Congrats on the anniversary. So what was it exactly, or was it a eureka moment, or is it just kind of over time you just realized, no, not a believer?
I tell everybody the biggest reason that I'm an atheist is because I read the Bible. But to be more specific, I was deployed in Iraq, and I thought that was a really good chance that I was going to die. And I found myself writing letters to friends because we did not have good internet. We didn't have good communication. And so I felt that I was giving too much attention to other people and not God, given that I'm probably going to die. And I thought I was guaranteed to go to heaven. So I came up with the novel idea to find out what's going to happen in the afterlife. I just really wanted to know what happens after. So I started to read the Bible from page 1. I told myself that I should start from the first page because I had read the Da Vinci Code and bigger books, So I just wanted to start with a fresh install, as if the Bible was a piece of software, and I just deleted everything that I was told about it, and I started from page 1, and then that's how it started. It just was a lot of things I learned on my own that they don't teach you in church.
Well, that's definitely true. It's interesting that you were kind of in almost the cradle of civilization at the time where you're trying to really figure out, what you believed. Now, two of the underrated, super religious spaces, at least as far as I'm concerned, military and sports, especially organized sports growing up, and especially college and pro. So when you were in the Army, was there a big a Bible study group? Did you feel like a lot of the people there were Christian?
No. Well, actually, yes, in some aspects. So, being National Guard, during my regular day-to-day, I'm a civilian, and then when I drill on the weekend, we only have 2 days to get our military stuff done, and so we don't really have time for that kind of thing. But while I was in basic training, I went to basic training December 31, 1998, and I graduated April of 1999. Basic training in Fort Benning was very religious. I remember going to, I think it's 30th AG, the reception place, and we went to basically a chapel, and they had a soldier kneeling down to a cross. And I was like, this is not a place for religion, because at the time I thought that everybody knew that God doesn't like killing in war. I was unaware that God was, or Yahweh in this case, was, the monster that he is. So anyway, Fort Benning in the infantry and just overall the Army, I think, has a rich religious tradition. And when when I was in basic training, on Sundays, we only had two choices: to go to church and get um, some space from the drill sergeants, which were terrors, or we stayed in the bay and just cleaned. So I did go to church, and it was super boring. And we were so tired that I would literally would be like sleeping all throughout the um, session. But it's because I was tired. I wasn't trying to be rude, and they did give us like this small New Testament book that had some Old Testament Bibles, and I thought that was very curious because I just thought that God would not want to be part of this organization because as infantrymen we were supposed to kill and destroy. Um, but yeah, religion was definitely a part of that experience. But once I got out to the regular 1 week in a month, 2 weeks in the summer thing, it really wasn't a thing. Yeah, so that was my experience.
So when were you deployed the first time?
We got called up December of 2002. We left the United States March of 2003, and we didn't return until February of 2004. And we left the United States. We spent about a month in Jordan before the war started. And then on my mother's birthday, which I'll never forget, May 1st, 2003, we took a helicopter to Baghdad, and our Iraqi adventure started there. And I spent about 10 months in Al-Ramadi, which is one of the more heavily, I guess, contested areas of Iraq during that time. So that was really tough.
Yeah, it's funny when I do some of these interviews, I'm talking to people who were religious and I never was, so I can't relate. And I feel like I can pretty safely say I can't relate to somebody's experience being, first of all, in the military, and second of all, being deployed. But you were deployed like during a really, I'd just say, interesting time in American history. Because like when the Iraq War first started, I feel like most people were kind of in favor of it. Did you think when you got caught up, you were like, oh, this is going to be like a quick thing?
Yes. So I was 11 or 12 when the first Gulf War started, and that was a pretty quick affair. So I thought that was going to be pretty much the same thing. I thought it was going to have about a month, 2 months tops. And when the war actually started, it was basically like must-see TV. Geraldo was riding on the back of vehicles as if, oh my gosh, it was just insane. But it kind of was a quick war in that we took over the heart of Iraqi government and toppled Saddam, and he was on the run. But sustaining and holding the ground and transforming Iraq to what it became, that was the long part. Yeah, so that's what it eventually became, and it was just crazy.
Did you know, like going in, that you were going to be there for 10 months?
No, and you touched upon how most people were against it, or so you said that most people were for war. If I heard you correctly, is that correct?
Yeah, at least more in favor than I would say people are now over extended military adventures.
I remember while I was in Fort Stewart that there was worldwide protests in different cities. And so I remember President Bush coming out saying that he doesn't need the world's permission to defend the United States. So I was under the impression that most people did not want the war. But because of people like Colin Powell giving his credibility to the notion that Saddam had weapons of mass destruction, and President Bush's determination to go and invade Iraq, I thought that was how it developed. But I did think it was going to be quick. I was worried about Saddam launching whatever weapons he did have and ending it badly for me. But luckily that didn't happen. But so that's basically what happened.
And like once the initial invasion happened, what was it kind of like? Like what were your duties on like a day-to-day basis?
When we flew to Baghdad, it seems like we didn't have a mission. We spent think 5 to 7 days at the airport, Baghdad International, which looked like a shell of its former self by that time. Then we found ourselves on trucks to go to a unknown site where we were watching basically POWs, and that was crazy because the stuff that I experienced, like I wasn't sure if that was kosher. Dealing with these people. I mean, this was before Abu Ghraib, but Abu Ghraib was probably a lot more graphic than what was going on with us. But it wasn't right with me, like as a humanist, because I learned that I'm a humanist while I was in college, but I just felt really strange about what we were doing, but we had to follow directions, and then from that mission we went to a dam, and that only lasted a few days, and then from the dam we got to Al Ramadi, and when we got to Al Ramadi, our mission was to basically win the hearts and minds of the people. I mean, the mission kind of changed to kind of establish some sort of order in the transition period. So that's basically the gist of my mission. And that was really the last thing that we did. And after that, we were replaced by some Marines and we came home. So, but during that time, they had something called stop loss. Stop loss meant that it doesn't matter if your contract was going to be up, let's say 2 months into the war, you were not going to be leaving. You were extended until, they were done with you. The only way to leave would have been to get hurt, die, or in the case of one of my squad leader, he was, I think, the first or one of the first soldiers to defect against the war and protest against it. So I was part of history as far as that's concerned, as a subordinate of his, and that was pretty awesome.
Well, it's definitely a historical time. So what was the time frame between coming back and then getting deployed to Afghanistan?
So came back in I think February 2004, and then my contract ran out 2000. I think September 2004. Took a break from the military. I traveled. I went to Europe. When I started going back to school because I went to complete my degree, and then I signed back up with the military in order to go to officer candidate school to become a lieutenant. I got commissioned, and then in October of 2012, I went to Kabul, Afghanistan, as an individual. My unit was going to deploy as a unit, but something happened, and I ended up going by myself. So, about almost 10 years between Iraq and Afghanistan, but it was totally different situations. When I went to Afghanistan, it was winding down, and I was an officer, and I was doing more logistical office type work. I wasn't out there doing, grunt infantry work. So it was different, but it was still war. So, it could go down anytime. So
what kind of interactions did you get to have with people who lived there, and what kind of feeling did you get about how people felt about the military presence? I mean, at that point, I think it had been 9-10 years the Army had been there.
Right. Afghanistan had been going on for a long time by that time, and I had very little interaction with local Afghanis. And when I did have interactions, they seemed pretty cool. The vibe I got, however, was that they got used to the occupation, but there was a sense of transition in the air, sort of, because we were trying to have them take care of their own affairs. I thought that the country itself was really beautiful. It's just a shame that war does this to people, because if I felt that with Iraq and Afghanistan, there's so much history that they could have just a tourism economy based on their rich history, and everything should be good. There's enough money to be made, but the people were interesting. They're very diverse. Their looks is interesting because they're Asians, and their history is interesting. But I didn't have enough time to do that regular talk with people because I was always on my duty, and of course there's a language barrier, and we try to be respectful of some of the small things that you and I may take for granted, but might be insensitive. So I was always trying to be respectful and represent well. So that was my impression of the people there.
And when you got to go back home, did you quit the military then, or were you still in for a while?
After I came back from Afghanistan, I stayed for a couple more years, but I got out. So I'm fully out now. And so it was a good adventure, but and I'm glad I did it because it helped shape me to be the person that I am now. I mean, if 9/11 never happened, I mean, I've been an atheist. If I didn't go to Jordan, I never would have met the Jordanian Muslims, which are different from the Iraqi Muslims. And I have such a real world experience with diverse people that it's hard to capture, because I met people that I would not have met had I not been in the military, most likely.
I was thinking we both live in Atlanta, and if you take like a 5-mile drive, you're going to see like 20 different churches, and there are all these different denominations. Yet when so many Americans think of like Muslims, they think of them as like one thing. And there's so much diversity there that we're definitely missing. I had another military, but I figure we covered that a lot. I wanted to get about, talk more about like, Haitian Freethinkers and some more of your kind of coming out. So you officially were in Atlanta by the time you got back to America?
Yes. So I just got the job with the police department. And before I deployed to Afghanistan. So I moved in August of 2012, and then I deployed August of 2012. And then in the summer of 13, my wife and kids moved up here. And so I came back and been here pretty much ever since. Yeah.
Are you still with the police?
I am, yes.
What is your job?
Regular patrol officer.
Patrol officer.
Mm-hmm.
So you made that's probably a pretty familiar trip. I'm sure a lot of people who are veterans are like police officers. Maybe one more thing about the military. Do you have like thoughts about the way kind of Americans almost worship the military in a way, but also don't really think about them that much? Like, before, because you're a football fan too, like before football games, you have this giant military craziness going on. But the way we kind of treat our veterans and the fact that, it's a volunteer army and we've been in these wars for like 20 years and people don't seem to care. As someone who's like a veteran, what do you think about the way kind of America thinks toward like the military?
I think America worships the military way too much. I think we are the sacred cows of American culture. People use the term holy cow and sacred cow kind of loosely, but in India, that's really a serious thing. But in America, we are heralded as demigods and, highest heroes and pomp and circumstance and all that kind of stuff. And that's good for me because I benefit from that. And I actually put in the work. I was deployed and whatever. But I think this current climate is a response to what happened with the Vietnam War, Vietnam, with what America was doing and how veterans were treated after they came back. It was the complete opposite. So the government and the culture just made a concerted effort to go from what the perception and the reception of veterans were back then to what it is now, to make us feel special and make it, imbue, different aspects of the society, such as sports with the NFL, with this patriotism, which is now like overboard a little bit sometimes. I mean, people get into a real heated debates and discussions about patriotism. It's kind of like you're un-American if you're not doing everything the way that some people feel that you're supposed to. Of course, with the whole Colin Kaepernick thing, we see that, and recently with the women's soccer team. So yeah, so we're the military is definitely the sacred holy cow of American culture, to the point where people don't ask questions like, how much did these wars cost? Basically the military is given kind of like a carte blanche. And if you dare question anything about the military and not support it, then you're ostracized. So
yeah, it's weird when like the military budget is discussed. It's always like, well, it's got to grow a certain percent, but then when like veterans, like money for helping people who come back from war, who are dealing with all kinds of issues, the money doesn't seem to be quite as free flowing. So yeah, there's definitely that issue. But I wanted to talk about your group you started, because you mentioned your military history. Like you got back here, you said your wife and kids came up here in the summer of 2013, and you started a podcast pretty soon after that. But what made you decide to get started with Haitian Freethinkers?
that's a great question. When I was still living in South Florida, I joined the first atheist group called Flash, Florida Atheists and Secular Humanists. So shout outs to them. So there was a little regional meetup that we had, and the amazing Randy came down, and people from the Broward County Center for Inquiry. And so there was this was the time in 2010, 2011, where there was a real zest for secular thought. Hitchens was doing his thing, and I was discovering all these great people. And so I was sitting right next to the amazing Randy. And I thought, I don't know too many secular Haitians. So I was like, somebody should do something about this. And I mentioned that to the woman who was in charge of the Broward County Center for Inquiry. And she kind of said, like, yeah, somebody should. And it's like, they're looking at me. And I was like, wow, I am somebody. So I said, wow, how would I do this? And I just started to feel overwhelmed, because I'm like, this would be such a challenge, because I had known maybe one or maybe two other Haitians who were atheists. So I talked about it with my wife Valerie, and we decided to use Facebook as the platform to start it, because it was easy and free. And that's how Haitian Freethinkers was born. And my goal initially was to find 10 Haitian people who were atheists, and we've surpassed that. And so we're continuing to do what I call is the work, which is to basically be a place where secular Haitians can gather and talk and be together, because we're a minority right now officially. But I think if more people heard me speak and more members and like-minded people, if they understood us for real, there'll be a lot more secular people. It's just a lack of awareness, I think, that has our number low.
Well, have you ever met like other people who live like locally? Have you ever done like a kind of a local meetup for like Haitian Freethinkers, or is it still kind of an online thing?
It's mostly online, but I have done local meetups when I was living in the South Florida area. Online, our presence is stronger, because obviously you can connect with people all over the world. So now that I live in Atlanta, I met one young lady who I found through Facebook. So it's mostly me and my wife. I have a friend from high school. He's down with us. So we're here. So it's all about, letting people know that we're a thing. And then out of the woodwork, through networking and through doing stuff like I'm doing with you, and my last interview on Truth Wanted, people kind of say, hey, there's a crazy Haitian guy, hopefully, and, they find out more resources. And really what I want to do is put information out there in Haitian Creole, and to kind of have people understand, where we're coming from. And so that's basically what I'm trying to do. But it's very difficult to have a large crowd of Haitian freethinkers to actually do like anything consistent as far as a live meetup.
Well, at least you've cornered the market so far, but it's one thing to kind of start a Facebook group and we do that kind of online version. But what made you decide to actually start doing a podcast? Because you started doing your show, I think the first episode was October 26, 2013. So you've been at it for a while.
Yeah, so I discovered the platform Block Talk Radio. I forgot somehow, but and I decided to just go at it. And before you know it, the years flew by, and one of my main motivations was, there was an earthquake that happened January of 2010 in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, and so I said to myself, I don't know how many Haitians can actually articulate what the cause of an earthquake is. And, Pat Robertson made his awful comments about Haitians making a deal with the devil in order to gain our independence, yada, yada, yada. But the problem is a lot of Haitians are superstitious and they are religious. And I think way too many people don't know how earthquakes are really formed. So by doing the podcast, it was one of the ways that I was dabbling with how to provide positive, good, solid information, and also have an entertainment piece, And so that's how the podcast idea happened. And like we were discussing earlier, we're still at it. I try to be as regular as possible. Challenges do come up, but it's been a wonderful outlet for me because becoming an atheist was not an easy thing. And doing that podcast was part of my kind of like therapy, my deconversion outlet, because I definitely gone through my stages as a former believer, and I'm in a much better place now. And it's just so awesome to be atheist. It really is.
Do you have like a regular time for your show?
Yeah, well, we try to do it Sundays at 10 a.m. That's because my current off days are Sundays and Mondays. My off days have changed before, and I do have a co-host, James. But because of challenges, with kids and stuff like that, sometimes we're not as regular as we would like to be. But Sunday at 10 a.m. is the goal because my idea is to capture the crowds before they go to church. So before you go to church, somebody hopefully sneaking into their closet or whatever and listening to me. And since it's a call-in show, they can call in as well. So I like that time frame. So Sundays, 10 a.m. because usually the Sunday school crowd, and 11 o'clock seems to be the main time when people hold service, and usually they're out by 1. So that's the goal.
How did you meet your co-host? And do you have one or multiple co-hosts?
I have one main co-host, James, but I met James on Facebook. I try to diversify as far as co-host is concerned, but James is my main co-host. But I've met some new people who are really interesting that I'm trying to like do some more work with. Like we're doing this interview right now. We want to incorporate new aspects, video and whatever. We want to speak more Creole because my Creole is not the best. And I met some really, really smart guys. And so we're looking to do some really cool stuff coming up in the future and be more consistent. But yeah, so most people I meet are on Facebook, and WhatsApp is another platform that we've used to speak to some Haitians who are secular in Haiti. I just did an interview in Creole, which should be available on YouTube now. So we're trying to use every resource available to kind of put it out there that we're doing this wonderful work to help out in the best way that we can.
Well, I know it's almost like asking about your favorite child, but in the past 6 years of doing the show, do you have like favorite topic you've discussed during the time?
Wow, that's a really good question. Favorite topic? I think one of my favorite shows is just about atheism, but like about Haiti. I met a guy who's super sharp, and from Haiti. He's just trying to start a group, and he educated me about history of the church and its involvement with Haiti. So that was a really good conversation. Also, I've had um, another guy that you may know, the infidel guy, Reginald Finley. I met him here in Atlanta, so that was a really good interview. And so yeah, those are the two that come to mind right now.
Do you have like dream guests that you would like to get on your show?
Oh, another great question. I recently had one pastor, Pastor Henry Mercy. So that was a dream guest, not necessarily because of the name, but because of what he represents. He was a very nice pastor, and he shared his time with me. So I'd like to have basically the top Haitian pastor out there. So there's Gregory Toussaint in South Florida. There's this guy his name is Prophet Mickinson, who's like a big evangelical guy who made the news for telling his followers that he can cure AIDS. So that was crazy. So those guys would be dream guests. I think the Matt Dillahunties of the world would be a little bit out of my league right now because I'm not big enough. Seth Andrews would be big. So yeah, those are I think my dream guests. Got people there in more Haitian centric circles, and hopefully, as we keep doing what we're doing, I can have you on eventually too. So those would be like my dream guests right now. I really wanna get into the church circles. I know it's a far-fetched thing, but I saw on YouTube that some churches are open to having conversations that are relatively civil and friendly with atheists. So I said to myself, I know it's really tough to penetrate that market, but I don't have anything to lose but to let it be known out there that, hey, I'm a Haitian guy. I'm honest with them. I'm an atheist. I would like to talk to your church people. And hopefully by knocking on doors, one day I'll get that situation, and we'll see.
Now I have some experience, listening to call-in shows because of, I think a lot of atheists kind of started their blog, their listening to podcast experience with like the atheist experience and a lot of the shows that were coming out of Austin. So have you had some really strange calls during the time that you've done your show? Have people actually called in to either like challenge you or maybe ask kind of strange questions about being an unbeliever or your history?
There's been some unusual conversations. The most unusual thing that I can think of the top of my head was someone that called and was telling us, me and my co-host, that African Americans are not really African. I mean, it was off topic, but I kind of entertained that person and I joined their Facebook group to kind of see what they're talking about. But that was kind of out of left field. But most theists say pretty much the same thing. They usually want to ask us or ask me, where do we come from if we didn't come from Adam and Eve? Do I believe in evolution? Whether it's a Muslim or a Christian, I don't speak to too many Jews. But I think most believers think and ask the same questions. But that was one of the things that was pretty unusual. Also, I had another caller call in a few years ago, and somehow we ended up talking about anarchy philosophy. So that was pretty interesting. But so those were the two things that I think were a little bit different: anarchy and African Americans not being really African. So.
Yeah, that sounds like a Robert Stanley right to reason, is history real type question. But I mean, based on what I've heard from atheist experience, yeah, that's the case. So did you enjoy, you were on, this is from the atheist community of Austin, and I'm sure people will get a reaction one way or the other from me just saying that, but what was it like being on the show Truth Wanted?
Truth Wanted was really good. The only thing is that my audio was terrible. So I feel really, really bad because we were planning on doing the show ever since I took part of the Atheist Day celebration back in March 23rd of this year. So I met Dan and, we talked about coming into the show and then we finally made it happen. But technical difficulties kind of made it not as good as I wanted it to be. So, but beside that, it was really good. I didn't have to fly to Austin this time because I actually was on the Atheist Experience with Tracie. And that was a really neat experience. So anytime I do any kind of interview, it's awesome because I feel like I'm just such a small person doing what you do, which is wonderful. By the way, I've listened to a couple of your shows by now, and you've introduced me to a really set of interesting people, and I'm going to continue to listen to your great podcast, and I hope that you come on to my show as well, especially when we set up everything the way I wanted to. But so it was a good experience, and I just I feel honored to talk to great people like yourself.
Well, thanks. It is good. Sometimes like, you've done this for years, but getting a chance to just talk to people, it does feel like the biggest connection you have is with someone who does what you do, because you kind of understand that it's not all a straightforward process. It can be a pain, and like you said, technological difficulties, especially adding the video aspect to this. And by the way, it's July 22nd as we're recording this, and Google Hangouts are ending at the beginning of August. So who knows how I'm actually going to continue this version of the show going forward. But we'll figure something out. Now, what I like to do when I have a guest on is I like to, especially with someone who has a history like you do, try to listen to recent episodes and earlier episodes. I think it was like the third episode, your co-host James talked about actually going to church and going to a Methodist church. And it was very interesting to hear about it, because one of the key things he talked about was how it was all about the food. And I'm thinking, gosh, the churches I've been to recently have been Catholic churches, and the only food they offer you are crackers. And there's really, there's a little bit of stuff attached to it. So do you get to church very often?
No, I haven't been to church since probably a year and a half, unless you count my recent visit in Austin, where we were hosted by I believe a Methodist church out there, but not for like a regular service. I have a friend in the police force who invited me to his church. I promised him I was going to go. I haven't been there yet. Now, I like to go to churches. I like to, still visit and see what the vibe is like, whatever. I don't ruffle any feathers. I'm respectful. If somebody asks, I tell them. But no. My off days are Sundays and Mondays, so everything works out fine. But I would only go if the vibe is right or there's a situation. But I've been to some local nice churches. Since you're in the Atlanta area, I'm sure you've heard about 12 Stone.
I think I've seen billboards.
Yeah, a lot of members of 12 Stone have the little sticker in the back of their car, but there's a 12 Stones church really close to me, and my oldest kid was singing in the choir over there, and it's just so impressive, that campus. And I actually had a chance to speak to one of the pastors. I told him I was an atheist and everything. So they seem to be pretty cool, pretty progressive. But besides that, I'm not using my free time to go to church just for no reason. So that's basically what's been going on.
And one thing I've noticed is you're a pretty level-headed guy. Is there ever a point in your podcasting career like where you've really wanted to go off on someone? Or are you just the kind of person who's just very steady about just about anything?
Yes, there was one particular thing that got on my nerves really bad. I was in Afghanistan, and I took my time to be the guest on a show on another Black Talk radio show called Debate Talk for You, where the host asked me to quote unquote debate a Christian guy named Josh. And basically that was a dumpster fire because the other guy, Stanley, who I've spoken to at length before, he was using the presuppositional apologetics trick on me. And what got me so upset was that I got up at like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning just to make a long distance phone call from Afghanistan just to hear crap. You know, it was pissing me off because if you ask me to come on your show and discuss a topic, I try to be prepared, you know, because I'm pretty well knowledgeable, but you know, it was such an annoying thing because I took it seriously and they were just, and this guy named Josh, his name is Brother Josh, and he has his own biblical show, whatever. When you watch him, he looks like he knows his stuff, but everything he knows is from the Bible. So it's like talking to someone who is very well read in the Marvel universe. So he knows all his comic book characters and how Black Panther became who he is and everything. And he sounds like a smart guy and he knows his stuff. But I mean, in my opinion, it's still fantasy, you know? And so that really got under my skin. And if you listen to that podcast, I was kind of being sarcastic because I was irritated. And basically, to give you context, they were saying that I already believed in God and et cetera, et cetera. I said, well, if you know what God thinks, if you already know what I think, or if I, you know, that I'm a believer, tell me who's going to win the Super Bowl. Tell me what the score is going to be, and tell me who the MVP is going to be. You know, so I got really sarcastic with it, but I mean, I went through my stages. I was really angry when I came back to the United States after the war. I was really pissed off because religion was a big part of the war, and I was upset. Like I'm still upset now that people don't recognize how serious of a danger that we could be if the wrong people get their hands on nuclear codes and what they can do. You know, we have a group of believers, Christians, who are expecting a bloody end time. They're expecting the Jews to be killed. Israel is using, or a lot of Jews are using the United States because they know that this is fantasy, but they're in a bit of a fantasy state themselves. So everything is kind of intertwined, and you know, people like me had to go be the chess pieces in this play. You know what I'm saying? And so I take it very seriously, and that kind of gets me upset. But on the everyday, I try to be cordial, I try to be nice, but sometimes I lose it because I'm very passionate about this because it's life and death.
Yeah, it's true. And if we really wanted a challenge, I could have you back on and we could try to do an episode that's uncontroversial. But let's talk about Israel. Let's talk about the police. Let's talk about the military and try to be, and religion, and try to be not controversial. Like, it's pretty much impossible. So as we're getting toward the end of the show, you know, we know you're a podcaster, but do you have any like special skills or talents that people might not know about?
Wow, that's a good question. Special skills and talents. I think I'm a little bit of a techie. You know, I've self-taught. You know, I do things that to me are second nature, but a lot of people find it interesting. You know, talents that that's a very good question. But you know, sometimes your talent is something that you take for granted. So I remember I was working in an office environment, and so I was helping do little things, set up office things, and they thought that was a big deal. So maybe that's considered a talent. I think one of my talents is my ability to take seemingly complex information, and if I understand very well, I can teach it to almost anybody. I think I'm a natural teacher. I think I'm a good speaker who can kind of go off the cuff. And so when I went to the Atheist Day celebration in Austin, I was extremely nervous to have these heavyweights be part of this lineup. And I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't really prepare a speech or whatever. And I just kind of spoke from the heart. and a lot of people said that they really liked what I was saying. So I think that if there's a special talent, it's my ability to kind of use my words. I was a poet at one point, so it kind of comes second nature to me. So when you combine my knowledge, my passion, and my ability to speak convincingly, I think that would be my special skill.
Okay, well, now that we're kind of at the end, let people know where they can find you online, where they can find your show, and is the show happening regularly at the moment?
At the moment, not right now, but you can catch all of our past episodes on iTunes, on Stitcher, Spreaker, Google Podcast. If you Google Haitian Freethinkers, everything that pops up should be in regards to myself and the group. Of course, we're on Facebook. We're on all the major social networking sites. On Facebook, I'm Reggie Beloved. And also I have a blog, Haitian Atheist. So if you put Haitian Atheist, Haitian Freethinkers, everything that comes up should be related to us, my group. And so that's how you can find myself. I'm super open and welcoming to everybody, including believers. So yeah, you can get in contact with me so many ways. It's not hard to find.
Okay, well, all links will be available in the show notes. And I always forget to say thank you, chat room. And sorry, I usually ignore your questions. They're just so good that I couldn't do them justice. That's probably the issue. Well, thank you, Reggie, for being on the show. It's been great having you on.
Zach, it's been a pleasure. I want to wish everybody a good night. Thank you for joining me. And for those who will see this in the future, make sure you check out the Sacrilege's cast, because it's great, especially the show with the gentleman from Australia. I really enjoyed that one. And there's a lot of great content on the Zachrilege cast that you guys need to check out. So check it out on Podbean, and where else can they catch it?
Oh, everywhere. YouTube,
Everywhere.
iTunes, most podcatchers, except for the ones I haven't heard of, but I'm sure they're terrible because I'm not on there. Anyway, thank you again, Reggie, for being on.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Miami has a dolphin, the greatest football team. We take the ball from goal to goal like no one's ever seen. We're in the air, we're on the ground, we're always in control. And when you say Miami, you're talking Super Bowl.
Live read. If you don't want to hear about the ACA drama, go ahead and sneak ahead about a couple minutes. If you do, check out the YouTube video Kevin Logan did with former ACA members Tracie Harris, Jen Peeples, and Clare Wuellner. I'm afraid to hear if Godless Bitches will continue, but it will be like when the creator got fired from Ren and Stimpy and they kept doing the show anyway. I can't figure out how people sided with the guy who made the at best mildly transphobic video and followed it up with, "But I have a trans friend and you're stupid," as his apology. All I can think is people are sick of outrage culture, which means they're fine with getting shit on as long as others get shit on more. On a slightly lighter note, I'm glad to see all of the space content with us passing the 50th anniversary of the first men on the moon. What is almost as mind-blowing as the landing was that Russia made multiple unmanned attempts to get on the moon, finally succeeding in bringing back like 3 ounces of moon material. They were the last country to land on the moon in 1976 until the Chinese sent a manned expedition in 2013. It was 36 years. It takes a lot of momentum to do something like that, and we should be happy that the effort was made and all of the subsequent technological innovations like Velcro, which is why I tie my shoes like a 6-year-old. If you want to support the show, be like Bobby, Hugh, Teode, Larry, Daryl, and the other Daryl, Freethinker215, and Chris Watson, go to patreon.com/Zachrilege, Zachrilege. I can spell it after 2 beers, so can you. Follow me on Twitter, like the Zachrilege Cast page on Facebook, and send all mail to zachrilege.cast@gmail.com. Thank you to Reggie for being on tonight. We will have more guests coming up shortly, so until then, let's continue the conversation.